back to the Beef Up Front podcast. This is your host, Ryan Coyle, and tonight I'm joined by Josh Nolan again as we go into our second episode of our new series, the Philly Hoops Landscape Series. Our first episode, we broke down Villanova. That got some good views, a lot of attention, so thank you guys for tuning into that one. Tonight we're going to be hitting up the Temple Owls. Before we get started, though, Josh, anything you want to say?
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Ryan. Yeah, I'm excited to get back into this. In episode 2 of our little mini series here. Should be an interesting one. I think a lot to talk about here. Maybe some constructive criticism for Temple, but we'll see how it goes, and I'm excited to kind of dive into it.
Yeah, I think going forward, it's going to be Villanova. Everyone really kind of knows the majority about them. These next few, I think, really going to be people will be able to learn some stuff if they're tuned in throughout the whole show. So it'll be cool to kind of break down these teams who aren't necessarily top of their conference every year like Villanova is. And so we'll start it off with Temple. We're just going to go through the same kind of outline that we did last time, and we're going to start it off with I'm going to break down the head coach. Head coach Aaron McKie went 14-17 in his first year as the head coach last year after taking over for Fran Dunphy. He was a longtime assistant under Dunphy and eventually got the head coaching job after Dunphy stepped aside. He went 6-12 in conference, 14-17 overall. He's a former Temple guard. He's from Philadelphia. He went to Simon Gratz High School. So he's got that Philly connection already to him. And then on top of that, he played for the Sixers. So he's played from high school through the NBA, all in Philadelphia at one point. So that's really big, I think. I think that's going to be able to help him recruit the area, kind of show, all right, you get these really good high school players from Philadelphia. I can show them that they can reach their dreams and reach their goals by coming and playing at Temple and eventually going to the NBA. I think that's going to be big. And he'll be able to have that. He already has that Philadelphia connection, kind of. So he's going to be able to recruit the area well, I think, going forward. But I also think Temple fans need to be patient with him as a coach as he builds the program with his guys. I mean, we've seen over time throughout not only college football, college basketball, NBA, NFL, it takes time to kind of build your program up and really get your guys in the building, the ones that you want to fit your scheme and fit your system. And Aaron McKie, I think, is going to want to play an up and down, fast-paced game. And Fran Dunphy kind of had a more traditional half-court style system, and he didn't really have these big-time athletic players, more so like fundamental guys, I think you could say. So I think McKie, in order to really take Temple over to new heights and reach the goals that he has for the program, he's going to be able to recruit his type of player. And fans might be upset with 14-17 in the first year. I don't think this year they'll be much better, maybe even worse after some key losses that we'll touch on shortly. But I think over time he's going to be able to get Temple back to relevancy nationally and competing for NCAA tournament berths every year.
Yeah, and basically, with basically any coach that you have, you're going to want to give at least a year or two grace period. It's going to take a while for a guy taking over a program to really kind of get a feel for things, get in touch with his players. A lot of these guys are, people that weren't recruited to play, or all of them in last year's case, and still a lot of them this year are going to be guys who are not to play within the system. But that being said, I think it's important to mention that Aaron McKie is a guy who comes from the Fran Dunphy coaching tree. He's been in this program for several years now. So I think that kind of bodes well for them. It's going to be sort of a continuation of Fran Dunphy in a lot of ways. I think they sort of share ideologies. And we've obviously seen a lot of success come out of North Philly in Dunphy's time there. And so, 14-17 is, the kind of result you want, especially for sort of a program with a tradition like Temple. But, it's a decent jump off point. At least they didn't have to They have, they kind of, had some good blocks in the first year. I certainly have faith in McKie to experience some success in his time at Temple.
All right. So our next talking point is going to be breaking down the past 5 years. Josh, you can take us away on that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mentioned just a moment ago, some of the success that Temple's experienced under Fran Dunphy. Unfortunately for them, they haven't really, fans haven't really gotten to take part in a lot of the success, over the last 5 years, in this window that we're looking at here. And also, something that I'm sure Temple fans won't like to be reminded of, we're going to start again 5 years ago, 2015, 2016, and really that was the best of the last 5 years if you're Temple. So that year, 15-16, it was the last year before they lost a crop of really good players. Obi Aneshionia is one that comes to mind, and they made the NCAA tournament outright after going 21-12 overall, and really astounding 14-4 in conference play, which is their still to date their best conference record since joining the American Athletic Conference, that is. And they were a 10 seed in the tournament. They ended up losing the first round in a great game. I don't know if you remember this one, Ryan, the one against Iowa. The game went to overtime, and Temple had either a putback dunk or a tip in at the last second that was discounted, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but because I guess and I'm not remembering right now who the player was, but I guess his fingertips were still on the ball as time expired, and so the bucket was discounted. They lost by about the slimmest of margins. Am I thinking of the right game here?
I think Iowa won on a putback at the buzzer, actually.
I know there was interestingly enough, I think we're going to be doing St. Joe's soon, if not next, and I think they had sort of
was St. Joe's won it on that.
There you go. All right, so I'm all mixed up here, but it was. I do remember it was just they lost by the slimmest of margins, real heartbreaker, and it turns out that a little bit of foreshadowing here. It turns out that would be Fran Dunphy's last visit to the round of 64, because that year was followed again. They lost a really good nucleus of players that year, and they had 2 straight years of real mediocrity, I guess you'd call it. 16-17, they went 16-16 overall. Obviously missed the tournament, and the next year again, not much to speak of. They improved their win percentage by a half a game. They went 17-16 overall. Once again, missed the tournament, sort of middle of the pack, high middle of the pack. The American Conference is one that's always real top heavy. There's usually 4 or 5, maybe 6 teams that are solid. It's usually a steep cliff, a big drop off between the top of the league and the bottom. But Temple always sort of hangs in that top half of the league. But this year they were hanging on for dear life, if you will. 2 kind of again mediocre seasons, not a whole lot to speak of. They sort of regained their form in 2018-2019 as guys like Quentin Rose and Nate Pierre-Louis kind of started to come into their own as players. They still, though, was kind of a roller coaster season for Temple. A lot of ups, a lot of downs, and they just barely squeaked their way into the tournament. They were actually, one of the last 4 in, as the selection committee calls it, and they played they had to play a first 4 game, a play-in game. And that was, as an 11 seed, they played against Belmont, which was, really kind of an interesting storyline going into that game. It was because we knew it was going to be the last game for one of the 2 coaches, whichever was sent home. Again, Dunphy with Temple and Rick Byrd at Belmont. Also interesting was the fact that, Belmont had received the Ohio Valley Conference's first ever at-large bid. And, that was huge for them. To go off on a little tangent here, and really for all kind of lower level mid-major conference teams, it was really neat. We saw a future NBA player in that game, Dylan Windler, and he ended up pacing them to a victory there. So Rick Byrd moved on for his he got his first ever tournament win after a really storied career, 20-some years with Belmont, and Temple was sent home, and that ended the reign of Fran Dunphy. which in total looks like it lasted about, let's see, he was with Penn, looks like about...
I think it was 2006 to 2019 is when he was, or 2018 when he was the coach at Temple.
Yeah. So, a little more than a decade. Yeah, a lot of success. 8 NCAA tournaments at the time. So just a lot of sustained success, but fortunately more so in sort of the first half of his tenure there in the Atlantic 10 days, where Temple was really sort of one of the powers that be in that conference.
Yeah.
They still have kind of yet to find their groove in the American. But, I think much of that really blame on, when you go into a more competitive conference, there's going to be, fewer opportunities, or, you're going to have to prove yourself just that much extra to kind of, just keep up that consistency and keep making this work. And last season, 2019-2020, again, a season cut short, obviously, due to the coronavirus, but one where we sort of saw the direction it was going. You talked, mostly about this season. You talked sort of in depth about this season, so I'm not really going to go into it too much, but they ended up, like you said, they ended up finishing 14-17, 6-12 in the conference. Pretty significant drop-off, but, again, to be expected when you lose a guy like Dunphy at the helm. But, I think that, it's good that McKie is sort of been around that program. He's been able to sort of be part of that Dunphy culture that I'm sure is still resonant around Temple's locker room. And, I do expect, maybe not necessarily this coming year, but I do expect things in the long run to sort of go up from here.
Yeah, I mean, Temple, I think the past 5 years, they was just kind of inconsistent. And as good as Dunphy was throughout his time at Temple, I think it was like time for change. It kind of reminded me of like Andy Reid with the Eagles. Like, as great of a coach he was throughout the history of the program, it was just time to go in a different direction, I think. And as you were saying, McKie as coming from the Dunphy coaching tree, but I think he's also going to bring his new ideas and philosophies to the game. So sometimes it's just better to get a new voice in there and try and push the program to new heights going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's important, the ties you made between McKie and Temple program and the city of Philadelphia at large. I mean, he's a guy who's really made his career in this city and largely around this program. He's the kind of guy you want at the helm, because just putting him in even if he's as little as a figurehead in that program, which I think he's more. I think he'll be a solid coach and really grow into his own. But I mean, just for potential recruits, just seeing a guy like that who, home, if you will, a guy who achieved really great success and a solid NBA career coming through that program. Yeah, it's a beacon of hope, or something that a recruit can look toward and feel confident in going to Temple.
So next thing we're going to talk about is some key losses, some key returning players, and a breakout player for the upcoming season. Some key losses. Temple's losing a lot this offseason. The complete opposite of Villanova, who we talked about last week, only losing one guy who's going to go probably in the lottery in the NBA draft. But Temple's not losing any guys of that caliber, but they're still losing a lot of key contributors. They're losing Alani Moore, a senior guard to graduation, who was one of the leaders of that team, a really tough defender, a guy who pick you up full court and really just up in your grill the whole way down the floor. And he was a really good shooter, especially from beyond the arc. They'll miss that scoring punch. They're losing their best player in Quentin Rose. He's a player who could score, defend, rebound, had very good length, athleticism, was good in the open court. They're really going to miss him. I think he's a pro player. I don't know about the NBA or the G League, but he's definitely got enough talent and skill to work with where he can be a very productive overseas player. So anytime you lose a professional off your roster, that's going to take a hit. Josh Pierre-Louis, brother of Nate Pierre-Louis, who you're talking about, transferred out after his freshman season. And he's going to UC Santa Barbara. That's a big loss. Aaron McKie probably was counting on him to take over as a starting guard this year. He's a very explosive player, very good defender, and like I was saying, he's probably going to be a starter. So it kind of was a head scratcher as to why he left the program. Maybe he just didn't get along with McKie or something. But he's a Jersey guy going all the way out to California now. It'll be interesting to see how he does. And probably the biggest loss, other than Quentin Rose, was Nate Pierre-Louis. I think he was going to be their best player this upcoming season. Regarded as one of the best defenders in the country. Led Temple in rebounds as a 6'3" guard with 8.5 per game. He scored about 15 points per game, I believe. But he graduated in 3 years and felt that it was time for him to go pro. I mean, he entered the draft. I doubt he'll be an NBA draft pick, but looks like he's opting to play professionally somewhere else, and he already earned his degree, so he felt like college wasn't for him anymore. He didn't really need to play college ball anymore, I guess. But a lot of key losses. 4 of their 5 leading scorers are out the door, so there's going to be a lot to make up for this upcoming season for Temple. Some key returning players. You got Jake Forrester, who was 4th on the team last year with 7.5 points per game, and he had a 53.3% field goal percentage. He's one of those bigs who he's a great rim runner, very high level athlete. He's explosive as they come. He's going to be great if McKie really wants to run this up and down system, he's going to be great running down the middle of the lane and kind of catching lobs from guys off pick and rolls and things, and really making his presence felt in transition. I think getting a step ahead of a slower big and point guard throwing the ball out in front of him and getting some dunks. He's not a guy who's going to shoot much from outside the lane, but he's going to be a very effective player and a rim protector. So that's a big guy coming back. He was an Indiana transfer, so just speaks to how highly he was recruited, and he went to Westtown, which is outside the Philadelphia area. So that's a big get for McKie, even though he already played a year. That's still another big kind of a recruit, even though he's a transfer, and big that he's returning this upcoming season. You also have Devondre Perry coming back, who's a versatile forward. I think he could have a big season. I'll be talking about him shortly a little bit more, so I don't really want to expand on him that much right now. And J.P. Mormon, he's a tough, rugged player, just kind of an old-school forward. He can score and rebound very well, I think. He's going to be probably the leading rebounder on the team this year, if not one, up top 2 or 3, and he's going to be relied on to score. He's going to be one of the more veteran-led players on the team. He's a returning captain, so he's going to be counted on to provide some key leadership. And my breakout player is, like I was just saying, Devondre Perry. I love his ability to shoot the ball, 42% from 3 last year. That's very good numbers. But I think Temple's definitely going to need him to step up this year after losing Pierre-Louis and Quentin Rose, Alani Moore, three of their better scorers. And they also lost another guy to the transfer portal. His name escapes me right now, but another guy who was counted on for scoring. So Perry is going to be counted on this year to take on a bigger role. And I think as long as he develops more offensive moves to his arsenal, that he could be Temple's go-to guy on offense at the wing. That's not necessarily the best thing, I think. That kind of speaks to Temple's maybe lack of talent for this upcoming year. But Perry could be one of those players in the American Conference who's kind of being slept on, but in a bigger role with he's got great length and height where I believe he's 6'7" wing. So he could score from all 3 levels. I mean, if he gets a smaller guard on him, he can take him in the post. He can attack the rim. I think he's going to be effective in the mid-range, in the high post area if they need him, and he could shoot the 3-ball really well, as I said. So he could be one of the breakout players, not just for Temple, but for the American Conference overall. Maybe sneak his way onto an all-conference team if all things go well this season.
Yeah, I mean, so just to sort of recap all this, I mean, the key losses are kind of what the sore thumb that really sticks out here. I mean, of course, you're going to lose guys like Moore and Rose, who are seniors, and that hurts a lot for sure. I mean, your guard play is going to need a boost after that. As far as a guy like Pierre-Louis, or Nate Pierre-Louis, that is, the elder of the brothers, there was something that kind of surprised me at first when he said he was going to leave early. It's something I think I'm maybe understanding a little more as I go. Pierre-Louis is a guy who really doesn't kind of project to be a draft pick, even if he stays next year. You know, he's not the type of guy who's probably in that conversation. But like you said, I mean, a gritty, like, you know, guy, great defender. But, you know, I think we're going to see a lot of this, and we already are. I mean, I was looking at, you know, recently, it was, I think since the last time we recorded, if not a little bit before, the list were released of who's opting to remain in the NBA draft versus return to college. And there was some head scratching guys where I was like, you know, this guy just doesn't seem to have really a prayer even of being drafted. You know, guys even much more so than Pierre-Louis, I'd say that I put in that category. But, you know, I'm starting to think, you know, given the state of affairs right now, just the world we're living in with this virus and whatnot, you know, I think that guys are starting to think like, you know, we may not have a season this year. And if we do, it's going to look drastically different than it normally does. And there's going to be a lot less opportunity to really showcase ourselves. So especially a guy like, you know, in Pierre-Louis' shoes who's got that degree under his belt already, you know, who's kind of finished his, you know, academic curriculum. Yeah, you know, you figure, and again, especially a guy like him who just, you know, doesn't project to have a very, you know, very long and fruitful NBA career, if he even does have one, you know, although he's a guy I really like as a player. Yeah, I just think that he maybe figures, you know, let's just get out there, start making money, you know, get an extra year on my belt, you know, for these slam dunk NBA guys, you know, you never know where your next kind of career opportunity in basketball is coming from. So, you know, you want to get, you kind of want to get paid while you can. It's one that it's a move that I've started to, I guess, understand and maybe even agree with. Not that it's really my place to agree, but, you know, I've more and more as time has gone on. The more concerning one, I think, is, you know, if you're the Temple coaching staff, alumni, et cetera, is his younger brother, Josh Pierre-Louis. You know, when you have a guy, and you touched on this a bit, who is, you know, who experienced, you know, some decent success, played some minutes with your team last year, and you're losing, you know, three of your other top scorers around him, and he's going to step up and really have a chance to, like, you know, be the guy this year, and he opts to you know, I'm going to call it, you know, transferring down. You know, UC Santa Barbara's in the Big West. It's a top to bottom. It's, you know, certainly less conference. He's probably not going to get much, if any, TV time. You know, nationally televised games there. You know, the facilities are probably second rate compared to a school like Temple's. And you know, when a guy still opts to go out like that, you know, it makes you wonder. You hope it's just maybe something on a personal level where, you know, maybe it's just he didn't like the fit there. Maybe he with you know, with the coaching staff, but you know, you hope this isn't sort of like, I guess, a precursor of, you know, more to come. If we start seeing more moves like this of guys who, you know, and it's one thing if a guy comes in and isn't really experiencing success with the team, if he's kind of getting buried in the bench and then he, you know, decides to transfer it down to a smaller school, that's obviously understandable. But when you have who's set to be, you know, a pretty key piece for you, and then he decides to transfer it down, that's a little concerning. So that's something that I'd say to keep your eye on. I think it's definitely not indicative yet of, you know, any larger trends. It's sort of just a singular example, but it's something to, you know, again, keep your eye on. But yeah, I agree with the returning players. You know, I particularly remember Mormon being a guy that sort of stuck out to me. You know, a high energy guy, like you call him tough, rugged. You know, that's, you know, good adjectives for him. He's a scrapper. He's a guy who's gonna, you know, earn his minutes and you know, earn all the points he gets, and, you know, just through a lot of hard work. He was a guy I really liked.
All right. So our next segment will be schedule/conference breakdown, as we were talking about last episode. With the uncertainty about the start time of the season and whatnot, we don't have a concrete schedule, but maybe just some potential matchups to look out for and kind of break down what Temple could be seeing in the conference this year.
Yeah. So again, going off of what you were saying, you know, I'm gonna lean in this one more towards just, you know, a sort of conference overview, and really for the conference as a whole, it's looking to be a pretty good year, which, like we said, it may be a down year for Temple, and that bodes all the worse for them, I think. You're going to have luckily for Temple, we talked briefly off camera before, Ryan, about Wichita State. In the past we've spoken about them and how they're in a similar situation to Temple. They've lost a lot of guys to the transfer portal this year and just, to alternative options in general.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, they're a team that's usually a staple that tends to fall, ahead of Temple. And working against them, though, is the fact that, I guess while I'm talking about advantages Temple will have, we don't see a ton of, real great recruiting classes coming in this year. I was looking, 24/7 Sports did a ranking of, the top recruiting classes coming in. And the league only had two teams fall within the top 50 nationally, and Cincinnati was the top one of those teams that had 44th in the nation. So, we're not seeing a great year for incoming recruiting classes, I wouldn't say. Houston was the other one there at 48th. But Cincinnati and Houston, I guess to talk sort of on the downside of your Temple, Cincinnati and Houston are going to be as good as ever. Houston is a team that people are saying could potentially be top 10 in the nation. They're going to be really the class of the league this year. But Cincinnati, once again, should be a pretty surefire. NCAA tournament team, again, assuming there is one. And we, all the precursors we always talk about, assuming that things are as they usually are. We'll absolutely be seeing Houston come March, and we'll be seeing a lot of Cincinnati too. Things, honestly, in the league, things are pretty much as they normally are. In terms of like the pecking order, we're gonna have UCF teams like UCF and SMU make a run at the tournament. You have your sort of outside the box schools, a Tulsa, USF, South Florida, that is. Maybe one of those schools, probably will have a significant, a 20-win season and possibly contend for the tournament. The big thing, and we talked about this last time in the Villanova overview that we did, so I'll keep it brief, is the loss of UConn. That's an interesting sort of tidbit in the league. So that we have them leaving for the Big East, where, again, let's face it, that's sort of where they belonged all along. But the league goes down to 11 teams. So that'll be sort of an interesting dynamic. It could, change the scheduling overall. But yeah, I think for Temple, if I'm going to highlight a few key games, it's going to be important to win, to take some of these home games, especially when you have again, I sound like a broken record here, but if we're traveling as we normally are, if teams are going to campus sites, especially if, and this seems very unlikely, but especially if we have, if we're maybe able to get some fans in the stadium. Is usually a pretty decent one in Temple's case, but when you have, especially when you have another sort of middle of the pack team like an SMU who has to travel across the country, might be experiencing some fatigue from a road trip, especially if if they have to go up to, say, Cincinnati or East Carolina or something before Temple. You want to be able to jump on a team like that, and Temple's going to be a young team this year. They're going to want to really get out and try to run these teams into the ground.
Yeah.
So that's just that's something I like to see. I really like to see, again, Temple with the greatest team this year. It's great if you can steal a game off of a Cincinnati or Houston type. Those games, those games might be washes. They're games that they'd probably be expected to lose, even if they play both teams, even if they play those teams twice. But yeah, if you can steal a game, especially a home game, off of a Wichita State and SMU, Central Florida, that's going to be pretty huge. It's just kind of winning within the margins like that, taking advantage of teams sort of within your status within the league. I think that's going to be big.
Yeah, and there's always, just with all these teams, the Big Five schedule too. It would be, I think, too, as LaSalle has a new coach or relatively new coach. St. Joe's has a relatively new coach. I think these Big Five battles are going to be like kind of important when it comes to playing second fiddle to Villanova in the recruiting aspect of getting guys from the city of Philadelphia. I think if Temple can show that, all right, we're getting better than LaSalle, we're getting better than St. Joe's, and maybe that'll kind of speak to recruits as well that they're the one of the top teams in the city, and maybe I should, if I'm going to stay home, maybe I should stay home and go to Temple rather than a St. Joe's or a LaSalle, something like that.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm gonna pretty much just leave that there because I'm gonna speak a little more on that in the next segment.
All right, yeah. So the next segment is the coach's shoes segment on building the program. Josh, you can take us away on that one.
Sure. Yeah. So as we go through this this series, I think I may sound like a bit of a broken record at times because for most of the teams that we're going to be covering, I have a sort of a gripe, and it seems that for the most part, a lot of these local teams, Temple being one of them, is they're just not taking advantage. It seems like of this local market that they have. Villanova does it decently well. Temple hasn't really done it a whole lot at all. They've cornered the state of New Jersey pretty decently. They get a lot of good prospects from across the Delaware River, but they're not getting a lot of guys from at home. Philly is it's kind of got that just that Northeast grid, same as New York. It's always just a hotbed. There's a lot of great prospects coming out of Philly every year. A lot of D1 guys, and if you're a team like Temple, when you have these guys in your backyard who are hooping on a national level, you want to be able to kind of pull some of them in, and I just think that's something that Temple particularly has really not done well. So I think we've talked enough about McKie, so I'll keep this brief. But you have a guy like him who's kind of who is just like an emblem of Philly, who's really a mainstay in the city. You're going to want to take advantage of your local connections and start bringing in guys. You're going to touch on this a little later about how they're maybe starting to change their fortunes in that way. But I think that's the biggest thing in terms of recruiting. Now, I'm looking at the team stats from last year. They were actually a pretty solid defensive team. We talked about Nate Pierre-Louis and how he kind of helped pace the team in that way. One thing that though is that and really when you look at Temple's stats on the surface, they're not too bad. I mean, and when you look at their average overall team stats per game versus their opponents, they just they honestly outnumber their opponents in most categories. But one thing I'd like to see them do a lot better in, this has something to do with recruiting, something to do with player development, is 3-point shooting. They shot a little over 30%. Not great. Definitely not where they want to be. They were 236th in the league in that regard. Really, their offensive game as a whole, a lot of offensive stats. They really need some help with. Their overall field goal percentage is there was 40.4% on the season, which ranks, to get this, 332nd out of, I believe, 357 teams in D1. Thanks. So that's real bad. You want to get that up. Their offense in general, total points 68.3 per game. That's 266th nationally. And a team that's in, let's say, probably the 7th best conference in the country out of 32 conferences, you don't want to be down in that level, and in the 200s in just about any. And you see, if you look through their stats here, you see the 200s and 300s if you look at their rank amongst the country in a lot of these positions. So they really need to get some player development going offensively. I particularly like to see them bring in some shooters, some outside shooters. I think they've done pretty well with that in this year's class, which I'll talk about later. But we need some offensive development. Their defensive stats actually, stick out. It's really kind of night and day when compared to their offense. Defensive rebounds, they pulled in 27.8 per game last year. That's 31st in the country. That's great. I mean, it's very good. It's they've done pretty solid on the defensive end. But much better on the offensive end. Just that's going to be something they want to see. But yeah, I mean, but again, we'll have to see. There's a lot up in the air right now. Just there's going to be really a new look roster for them. So see what how the new guys gel and what strengths they bring. I mean, that there may be not much continuity at all in that way because it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be such a big turnover with them.
All right. Do you want to talk about the 2020 recruiting class for Temple this year?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So there was so the recruiting class 2020, they brought in 4 guys as well as 1 transfer here, and so the transfer is so I'm having a bit of technical difficulties here.
Ty Strickland.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. There's the name Ty Strickland, the guy from Wisconsin. So you definitely like to see that. He's coming from a semi-blue blood program, and so he sat on the bench for them last year. Again, I love the transfer portal. If you're a team that's consistently bringing guys in, because generally speaking, unless they get the immediate transfer eligibility waiver, they're going to they're just going to be able to get a feel for the team's culture. And also, get to know the playbook a little bit. So I think it's going to be good for a guy like Ty to, just come in his first year and, come in Aaron McKie's first year, that is, and just be able to get a feel for things before he steps in and plays. He's a guy who got limited minutes for Wisconsin, but and again, a limited sample size. He did shoot 50% from 3. So, that's something that he's really going to do well for Temple, hopefully. And again, we'll see how that pans out. But, you're going to like to see that. Hopefully he can come in. He fills a guard spot that Temple needs. And, he's just he's going to come in and just, do really well for them. Now, there's 4 freshmen here on the list. The first, they got 1 4-star guy in. That's Nick Jourdain, again, out of New Jersey. They got two of these 4 guys coming from New Jersey. So, again, it's kind of staying true to that recent pipeline that they've had. Jourdain's a big body, 6'8", 210 pounds. And he really showed some defensive prowess in high school. He's a good shot blocker. And just has active hands in general. So, he's a guy who's going to hopefully be able to kind of continue that defensive prowess that Temple showed the past couple of years. Now, the next guy, again, another Jersey guy. We got Jalil White from Wildwood Catholic out of Jersey Shore, and he's a guy who's got a really nice size body because he's more of a wing, 6'7", 180. He's a tall, lean guy, and what really popped for me when watching highlights of him was his just his offensive ability in general. He was able to he really loved to get to the basket. He was a really great penetrator. He was a kind of a dunk artist. He's could be potentially a really fun guy to watch. But he steps out and shoots the 3 at a pretty good clip too. The next guy I'm going to talk about briefly is Quincy Adamakoya. I'm going to say, hopefully I didn't butcher that. He's from Georgia. That's sort of an interesting, pull from Temple to get a guy from down south there. And he's a guy, again, another guy I saw who kind of was kind of able to shine on offense in high school. Like I mentioned earlier, Temple's really looking for some offensive spark plugs. He's a guy who I think could step in and be one of them. But yeah, just a really active player. He gets up and down the floor pretty well, and another guy who likes to get inside and kind of attack the basket, which is good to have that versatility for a wing. He's not a guy who's always just going to sit outside and shoot. He's going to get inside and not only score inside, but hopefully be able to be a playmaker too, kick out to some open shooters, and just kind of be a do-it-all guy on offense and hopefully provide some defensive abilities as well. The last guy is one who I think is kind of flying under the radar. He was only listed as a 2-star recruit, but he's a guy that I'm particularly high on after doing a little bit of research on him. That's a guy by the name of Jeremiah Williams. Big basketball markets at the high school level. Chicago is another one. A really great high school basketball scene there, and he's a guy who comes out of maybe the king of basketball powerhouses within Chicago. That's Simeon, and he's a guy who was able to hold his own there amongst some other good players. And Simeon's, and you like a guy coming from a big program like that coming into college, because in playing for a high school basketball team like that, it feels like you're in a college program more so than a high school one. With just all the talent that's around, and you're really gonna have to fight for minutes, touches on the floor, etc. But he's a guy who was really able to space the floor well, and he was able to find his spots too. He was just a guy who was able to kind of get in the lane. He's a little bit undersized for a guy who likes to play inside a little bit. He's listed at 6'5", 185. But yeah, I mean, he's somebody who was again able to pick his spots and just get in position to be on the receiving end of passes and score. And he's a guy who can just jump out of his shoes too. As a 6'5" guy, which is a better size in high school than it is in college, but still he was able to average 1.9 blocks per game last year as a senior, which is
impressive.
He's a guy who's willing. He's a willing defender. He's just going to bring energy and effort and do it on both sides of the floor. So that's a guy you love to have. I think he's going to fit in well here, and hopefully he makes it work at Temple.
Yeah, I mean, two of these guys, Quincy from Georgia and Williams, both 6'5", that gives them. I think Aaron McKie might be going for like some bigger guards now, trying to get guys who can play, both guard spots. I mean, 6'5", that offers positional versatility, and in today's the way basketball is played today, it's all about just having kind of like the best athletes and get guys who can defend and play multiple spots. So that's kind of the key, I think, in the recruiting that they're looking at now. And I really like the pickup of Jaleel White as well, just because of the fact I think that's like a big recruiting thing for McKie. I mean, he picked Temple over some pretty not high level programs, but some mid-major programs that are regarded as some of the best throughout the country. Bowling Green, who's been a very good team in the MAC over the years, Hofstra, Iona, Monmouth, NJIT, St. Francis. He picked, and he even had, according to 24/7 Sports, he had some interest from University of Georgia as well. So some fairly good programs there that he picked. He picked Temple over a bunch of them. So I think that's a good sign for recruiting going forward for Coach McKie.
Yeah, that is great. And in a way, I guess that's staying home for him. Apologies again for the technical difficulties there. My screen froze up on me there for a little bit, so I was trying to talk about Ty Strickland a little bit based off of memory alone. But other than him, my only concern about this class is that other than Strickland coming in as a transfer, you have again Jourdain, who's going to be play more of like a 4 for them, kind of a decently sized 4 for college, but undersized when it translates to the pro game, I guess you'd say. But otherwise, they got 3 guys who really sort of played the wing in college. For a team who lost a lot of guard play, I think that they wanted to that they'd want to maybe go more of the guard heavy route in this recruiting class. But like you said, I mean, maybe McKie is looking to get some big guards. Maybe a guy like Adam McCoy or Williams can sort of shift it. They sort of all play like the 5, or not the 5, the 3 right now. That's White, Adam McCoy, and Williams. They're guys who sort of played that position in high school, but hopefully one of them can sort of slide over into like an off guard kind of position, or maybe 2 of them, and provide some help in that way. That's sort of the only, I guess, concern I have with this class. But overall, I think a pretty solid one to get some good help here and do about as good as they can in picking up after the pieces that were left from last year.
Yeah, and that's like his first real recruiting class, because like the year before Dunphy was still there recruiting guys and stuff. So this is his first like full recruiting class that he's bringing in. So I think it's a good starting point. But I'll talk about the 2021 recruiting class. This is my favorite thing to talk about, the recruiting. I really love it. I think there's so many different avenues you can go down, so many different talking points, and it's just such an interesting thing to cover. For the 2021 recruiting class, so far they have 2 transfers coming in. They have Sage Tolbert out of Southeast Missouri State, so a very small school, but a guy who's a power forward, about 6'8", 210. Don't know much about him, but I mean, a pretty big body. We'll see what he can. We'll see what he can do for Coach McKie going forward. Don't really have much on him. But then you also have Khalif Battle. He's from Trenton, New Jersey. So still relatively close to Philadelphia, and he's a transfer from Butler. He didn't play much at Butler. Averaged about a little over 3 points per game and limited action, but 6'5", 180, another big guard like we were talking about, a guy who could play the 1 or 2. I think, and a guy who, I mean, Butler's a Big East program, so he is a high-level recruit, and maybe it just wasn't working out there, and thinks he found a better home at Temple. Then there's 2 guys that they have signed as actual recruits who are still in high school. They got Brandon Sanders. He's a center from Miami, Florida, 6'10", 205. So I mean, he's got great height, but 205, it's kind of a frail frame. So he's definitely going to need to bulk up before getting to the college level. Also, don't really have as much info on him, as he was only a junior in high school last year. So this recruiting class isn't being covered as much yet. But he's another guy who's just a big body and who hopefully provide Temple with their center of the future down the line. I mean, they lost Damian Moore last year, who was their starting center. They kind of got a veteran front court with like Mormon and Devondre Perry. So, I mean, this guy at 6'10", he's a true center, I assume. Hopefully he's a guy who is still developing, can work into that growing outside pick and pop game as a big guy, but I think he might be a good pairing with Forrester in the front court for at least a few seasons. And then this guy, member of our Beef Up Front family, Hyzier Miller, point guard from Philadelphia, Newman Goretti High School. I mean, I think he was a 3-star recruit, but just getting a guy that played in the Philadelphia Catholic League to stay home, I think that's as big of a thing that Temple could have got. I mean, he doesn't even have to be like a star player for Temple going forward, even though I think he has the potential to. Just like getting a big name guy from the city to stay home is just going to be such a big recruiting tool going forward. He's the first Temple commit from the PCL since 2004. So we're going on almost 15 or a little over 15 years now of not getting anyone from the Philadelphia Catholic League who has churned out McDonald's All-Americans every few years. I mean, you had Quade Green, you had Malik Waynes, you had Isaiah Wong. You have all these high-level 4-star, 5-star recruits who have left the city and gone on to greener pastures. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get out of the city and kind of make a name for yourself somewhere else. But one of the big things I saw Temple doing with this kid, Hyzier Miller, in terms of recruiting him, is emphasizing that you can be great at home. So I think that's one of the things that especially Aaron McKie can speak to, especially. And like I was saying, the first PCL commit since 2004, I think his name was Chris Clark was the last one, and he's on the Temple coaching staff now. So another guy who's going to try and use his Philly background to keep these guys here. But Hyzier Miller is a 3-level scorer, definitely a guy who has range all throughout the gym. Such an explosive player. I've seen him dunk in traffic many times. He's a blur in the open court, a high-level defender, just a big-level athlete. I'm really excited to watch him. As I was saying, we've talked to him here on Beef Up Front before. A great kid. I mean, I see videos of him on Twitter every day at the park at 6 a.m. It just shows, excuse me, that just shows how he's just constantly trying to get better and has such a great work ethic. And he's a guy who I think will be able to say, stay at home with me and play with me. I mean, there's so many guys from the Philly area still that he could recruit to come play with him. So that's just a huge pickup. And then some other guys going forward, just kind of what we've been saying, tap into that Philly pipeline more. Emphasize that you can be great while playing at home. So many good Catholic League players, public league players in the surrounding suburbs that you can get to stay home. And then you have Lynn Greer. Excuse me, I guess I'm stuck in my throat. Lynn Greer, great player at Roman, is a former Temple guy as well. He's doing like a post-grad year at IMG Academy, so another year to get better. But 24/7 Sports has 100% prediction that he'll wind up at Temple. So that's a legacy player, another point guard who him and Miller could kind of play together in the backcourt. But I think they might need to add some more knockdown shooters just to space the floor. And maybe take a chance on an athletic wing from like the public league, a guy who you see has the potential, but he's not being recruited that much. Just flying under the radar and kind of take a chance on him and bank on his potential and his athleticism coming around into a full player. But I think if they can't get it in the 2020 class, out of the guys that you talked about earlier, the 2021 class, I think Temple needs a quote-unquote guy that they can count on as like a legit scoring wing like they had with Deontay Christmas for several years, or Khalif Wyatt. There's so many good Philly players around. I feel like you can get one of them, or even like you were saying, tap into that Jersey pipeline that they have going as well.
Yeah, love the callback to Deontay Christmas. Last from the past, but yeah, I mean, and I promise you this will be a theme that I keep hammering home here throughout this series. There are, of these 6 teams that we're going to look over, I see 2 of them that are really taking advantage of the local basketball scene we have here, and they're 2.5, and Nova does it decently well, I'd say, but and the other 3 really haven't been keeping guys home at all. And when you have such a wealth of basketball talent right in your backyard, again, you want to do everything you can to keep guys at home. This is definitely not the heyday of Philadelphia basketball right now. You look back into the I'd say the 80s and the 90s, sort of all the top guys went to Temple, went to Villanova, home. And we had national championship teams, just really like great, memorable programs from the city. And again, and I think now with sort of this like internet culture tied to high school basketball, with sort of like with the kind of introduction of mass media over the years, and just the ability for coaches to recruit nationally and even internationally. That gets harder to do. I will acknowledge that, but it's something that you really want to see these teams strive to do. You want you should they really want to try to beef up their sales pitches to these local guys, and because it'll just be so huge for their roster if you're able to just tap right into your home market. I mean, it saves you money in recruiting. It's gonna it's just gonna make things a lot easier for you. You don't have to spend as much time because you'll have a couple of guaranteed guys every year who are gonna, who are gonna stay home and join your program, and that's such a huge advantage to have. Or when we get around to LaSalle, I'm gonna be excited to talk about sort of an interesting little recruiting trend that they have. I'll save that for a later date. But yeah, I think it's great that they're finally able to get that guy again. In Miller, again, a friend of the program. Really excited to see him get this opportunity, and wish him nothing but the best. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be the type of guy who can maybe sort of set that standard again in this new McKie era. Hopefully things will be sort of local centric, and they'll kind of be able to turn over a new page in terms of their recruiting. But yeah, I mean that's definitely I've got a couple solid transfers coming in. I talked a little bit about transferring down before, but when you get a guy like Tolbert, you can transfer down any time and for any reason, but you can't really move up to a really a nothing of a team, nationally speaking, like Southeast Missouri State, And if you're Sage Tolbert to be able to transfer to a team like Temple, that means he's really, he's proven himself. He's a handout player at a school like Southeast Missouri State. To make that jump up, it's not just given to guys. So that's a guy who I hope both he and Battle are guys who I believe the status of their transfer is still pending. So maybe one, if not both of these guys are people who we could be pleasantly surprised about. Who could be granted immediate eligibility, who we could even see next year. But Gilbert's a guy who I don't know a ton about, but just by virtue of the fact that he's coming from such a small school, it lets you know that he was able to shine there. And I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table. He's got good size on him, and a guy like Battle too. I remember seeing bits and pieces of his game in high school, and again, another Jersey guy, another and back from a big school here. So hopefully that was a good experience for him, and he learned a lot about Butler, and he's ready to sort of compete in these these big games and important contests against better competition. So those are two guys I'm excited for, and I'm excited for the incoming freshmen as well.
All right, good stuff. So you say you want to do LaSalle next?
I was thinking, if you're leaving it up to me, I was thinking maybe we do St. Joe's next. I think that would be an interesting one.
All right.
So,
yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we'll get on St. Joe's next, and then we'll follow it up with LaSalle, and then do Drexel Penn to wrap it up.
Yeah, we can talk later on. But that's for now. That sounds good. Fine with me.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again, Josh, for hopping on. Any last second comments on Temple going forward?
Again, it's going to be a tough year going forward for Temple. This is more of a long-term project. But, the good thing is Aaron McKie has all new coaches, especially ones that come from within the program. He's going to get some time. He's going to have a few years to, try to turn this thing around. If you're a Temple fan, I wouldn't necessarily expect a whole lot, this season immediely. But, just know this is a work in progress. And, I think as we touched on with their recruiting here, I think they're going in the right direction. I see a lot of signs. And McKee's a guy that I have a lot of faith in. I hope he can be the Penny Hardaway of Philadelphia. And, and just be a guy who can come in right away. And just his presence, around the program will, attract some guys to some big names to come in. That's something that I'm hopeful for.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the future of Temple basketball. I think McKie is definitely going to help out in the recruiting. That's the biggest thing for Philadelphia basketball. Keep the good recruits home. And I think he's got the upper leg on all the other kind of schools besides Villanova to do that.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Okay. Thanks again, Ryan. No, I was just saying thanks again for having me.
All right.
Supporting Beef Up Front.
All right, yeah. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. We're going to be dropping some long sleeve shirts soon, so keep an eye out for those. And thanks again for the support, guys. Look forward to doing St. Joe's next. Have a good one.
Okay.